Oh, okay. Mitch kicked it off for us. Sounds good. I guess I can share the meeting notes. Let me get this set up and remind myself how to share with Meet. Okay. So a bit. Okay. Looks like first on the agenda, we got a very full agenda today, so we'll try to keep things moving. William Zhang, you're here to talk to us about the upstream HTTP filter proposal.
Yeah, so I think 3 weeks ago, I made a issue and proposal and presented here about supporting patching like upstream filters, which occur at the cluster level, with an API similar to like the existing HTTP filter patch in the Envoy filter. The primary use case, at least for us, would be to add client-side throttling filters. So the admission control filter in particularly. So like there is like, in my view, and internally, there's like, what if the best decision is actually just to maybe propose having that specific filter as a first-class API in the destination role? But at least that's the context for why the proposal came to be. And in the previous meeting, the largest concern was like all the edge cases that could occur with existing patches, such as like the existing cluster patch. And from my side, there's a little bit of lack of knowledge on how it would interplay with ambient. So I quickly wrote a design doc. It might not be fully complete, and I'd like to see if there's any comments on the design doc or any things I've been missing.
Thanks for the doc. This is good. It helps me to sort of see where everything is in one place. I would say on the ambient question specifically, that is being done in another proposal. We don't currently support Alma filter for waypoint proxies. So I would probably consider that out of scope for this initial proposal. Okay, this looks reasonable. I will take some time to review this and add some comments. Thank you. This is good. This is what we need to help push forward on a decision here.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right, so action items on TOC, folks, and anybody else interested to review this design doc that William's prepared for us. So make sure to try to prioritize that. All right, next on the agenda is Sridhar asking for reviews on the ambient NF tables PR.
All right, Kate, I'll try to be quick. So the ambient tables PR is a fairly large one, and thank you, Kate and Leonardo, for taking the time for reviewing it. I have addressed all the review comments, and the PR has feature parity with the IP tables implementation, and all the integration tests are passing with both IP tables as well as NF tables backend. And we have recently added a CA job as well for the NF tables backend, which is passing with the PR. So I'd really appreciate if someone wants to take a further look on the PR. And if there are no further comments, can you please merge it?
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, I did one round of review. I can do another round. I think outside of Leo Sara, John is probably the person who's got most of the context here. John, is this something that you think you'll have time to get to?
Yeah, I can take a quick look. I mean, I know nothing about NF tables, so it would just be I'm not going to find anything subtle that's wrong with it, but maybe if there's anything very obvious.
Okay. There's like the node already approved it, so that gives me a pretty good degree of confidence in some of the NF tables fits. So yeah, I think maybe if you're okay with it, Sridhar and John, I'll try to either myself or John will give it another look by end of this week, beginning of next week, and try to get it. If nothing pops up, try to get it merged by then.
No problem. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, John and Keith.
All right, appreciate it. Okay, on to the next topic. Mitch, requesting TOC sign off on the multi-cluster beta checklist.
Yeah, so I got comments from John, and I'm going to be working to address some of those. Keith, I know you've had some interaction there too. There were a couple more issues that we've identified that will need to be added, but I'm still waiting on any kind of feedback from Lynn, Louis, and Rama. I think we had said we wanted to have comments in by a few days ago now, so maybe I just work with John's to resolve John's comments, and then we move forward, consider it approved.
Yeah, can you let me know when you've resolved my comments? Because otherwise I'll probably not notice, and then we'll be waiting on me again.
Absolutely, I can just reach out to you directly. I was looking through, I wonder if any of these need to be discussed today. We identified a couple of new bugs. We identified more of a testing gap. But those have PRs that are open for them. I think the big conversation was around single network support for multi-cluster and ambient. Does that sound right?
That and enabling waypoints to talk to clusters on remote networks, but Mikhail's actually got a topic for that next. So if we want to discuss single network here, we could take a little bit of time to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, single network's an interesting thing in that multi-network support should theoretically solve for it. Like, if you can go through a gateway across multiple networks, you can go through a gateway across a single network. It's really a testing gap, but it's a testing gap that's been out of scope for all of our design docs so far, and it's not something that Microsoft intends to invest in. Is that so, or John, I saw some of your comments asking if it could be added. Is that something Solo wants to drive?
No, it's not something we're interested in.
Okay.
But also, I mean, like one thing we need to have a clear understanding of is what happens when you do have a flat network. Like, does it explode? Does it just not? Is it not optimized? Right.
Gotcha.
And that's been kind of unclear as well. So, like, there's a difference between not supporting a feature and not having it optimized for single network versus, like, you do it and it's beta and then suddenly something breaks.
Okay, well, I think that's fair. Like, we could run some manual tests to make sure that we have just baseline sanity. I don't know of any architectural arrangements that are going to cause problems for single network. It's strictly speaking a simpler case than multi-network. But we can run like I guess kind of a smoke test sort of scenario. Make sure that.
Which I've tried it and it works, at least I haven't tried waypoints, but it just works for flat network multi-cluster.
Cool. Cool. Well, then I can update the thread with that information.
There is a tiny thing that may not work, which is any workload that is relying on session affinity and persistence, because obviously that is what TCP. That was always broken for multi-network. It was always working for single network, and probably it will be broken again if we. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Anything that's not meant to work in multi-network is not going to work in single network either.
Yes,
there's
so that means that we cannot just drop single network because for people who have workloads that require, this kind of persistence. I mean, when you connect twice to the same address, it will go to the same place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, the intent is certainly not to drop single network. Single network support for sidecar is still totally viable. Single network for ambient is just waiting for a contributor at this point. Like it's all there. We just don't have anyone who's really interested in driving that work upstream at this point.
No, I'm just going to document it and make sure that nobody who's relying on this kind of features. I mean, it's clearly explained what will break if you move from sidecar to ambient.
Oh, I
with
see. Yes.
Because people will
Yes.
be broken. People will really upgrade to ambient because it's better, but then they will upgrade and some applications subtly break because they don't break all the time. When you test, you probably have only one or two servers and you don't see it, but when you go to production, it will blow up.
That's a good point. We can add that to the limitations page that we already have in place, but I don't think that limitation is called out yet, so that we can add that. Well, I think those were the big items on this doc, and I think I'd prefer to just get out of the way for Mike to be able to address the waypoint question.
I guess right quick, John, does that plan on smoke test? Because it's you're the one who brought up the single network concern. If we sort of have some documentation around what is expected to happen with single network and we're confident it doesn't break, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, we don't necessarily need to have going through a gateway. I mean, I expect that then we'll get a bunch of feedback on not having that mode, which is really the biggest concern, or not concern I have, but more like the biggest prerequisite on the beta, I think, is gathering feedback. But we'll see. I mean, that's something we can definitely figure out from users trying it out.
So
yeah,
we've
to
had
that point.
That's something we should probably talk about expectations on. I know we've had some feedback via Slack on ambient multi-cluster. We have some Azure customers who are using it and providing some feedback to us. What format do we need for that for everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, you said we've gotten like feedback, but all the links I looked were more like bug reports. So it wasn't necessarily issue feedback that, we've that it's meeting our needs, right? It's more feedback of things we need to fix, which is great feedback, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily the feedback that we're ready for promotion to beta, right?
Gotcha.
Like what's missing for me is I don't know if like 100 people are using this happily and there's no issues and they're just ready to go for beta, or if no one's used it because we released it, 2 months ago or however long ago it was. I think it was maybe even less than 2 months ago. And now we're like, oh, that's great. We have just these 2 bug reports. We fixed those and now we're good to go. And actually just no one's used it. And there's like 1,000 bugs that we haven't found, right?
Right. Okay, I can try to aggregate some of the feedback we're getting on the Azure side into a doc somewhere that we can all look at.
I think for me, it's less that we are pushing a specific timeline for beta and more that we're trying to make sure that we understand what the expectations are early before we try to push the timeline. Like I think my concern with the feedback point, which is a good point, but I worry that it feels like one of those we'll know it when we see it sort of criteria. And the goal here, I think, with this doc, and Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, is to sort of understand what the criteria is before undergoing the work so that we know when we've hit that beta standard. Does that make sense?
It does. I just feel like the criteria to go to beta is to have user success, which is not a checklist, right?
Sure. I guess that goes to Mitch's point, though, when I was saying, like, what is that user success look like? Is it one customer saying we're using it and it's fine? Is it 3? What kind of workloads? Like, do we have a sense beyond just like vibes? What have we used in the past for the ambient beta?
That was primarily, it was primarily vibes. Like we've never had a good answer for this. I don't think anyone in open source has a great answer for this. In ambient, it was quite a bit different, I think, because ambient alpha was around for a very long time before we went to beta, and we got tons and tons of usage and feedback, right? Like on this, it's so new. Like, I don't know, actually, in this doc, I briefly skimmed, was there like a timeline that we were expecting, or even if it's not the doc, like, is there a timeline that we're targeting this for?
I think given what Mike's going to present about next, we're probably not looking at 128. Because that's going to take we want to make sure to let the solution that he's got coming down the pipeline get some, like you said, some utilization, some feedback, rather than developing it and pushing it to beta all in one fell swoop.
Yeah,
So
my biggest concern would have been really like if we had just said like, okay, we launched it in 127, people take like a month to notice, and then we say 128 it's beta, people are just now starting to try it, and then we don't actually get any feedback was all. I actually don't. I feel like we might have like a timeline of like a minimum time. Maybe it's a maximum time or something. No, I don't see a timeline. But in general, like I would think that for a big feature, like I would expect, at least 2 releases, so like 127 to 129, which is in line with what you're saying. Just to make sure we have time to have people try it out.
Yep.
That sounds reasonable. Okay. I think that helps. So, vibes, and just try to, I guess, gauge those vibes. We just need to find customers for whom we're getting success. And that might actually, as an action item, might be worth documenting as the beta requirement versus just feedback. I think John made a good point about the distinction there. Feedback of user success, I think, if it's not documented there, it probably should be. Okay, Mitch, anything else?
Nope, thank you.
All right. In that case, Mike, you're up next on double H-bone and Waypoint.
Oh yeah. So I wrote a doc how we can, like, with a proposal of how we can enable like double H-bone in Waypoint and allow Waypoints to talk to clusters on the remote networks via East-West gateway. Basically, the idea is to like it describes some configuration in Envoy that I like manually tested that allows to establish like a double H-bone connections. The design like looks how we need to modify the EDS to like trigger that path in Envoy, and how do we tell East-West gateway if it needs to send the data to Waypoint in the remote cluster or directly to the service, because in this scenario, we now have 2 potential ways to reach a service on a remote network. One, if zTunnel doesn't find a healthy Waypoint locally, it will send the data to a remote network, at which point like East-West gateway will have to send the data to Waypoint to apply the L7 policies. But it also can happen that we find a Waypoint locally, and it will apply L7 policies, figures out where the data is supposed to go, and at that point figures out that, well, there is nothing locally available, or like nothing healthy locally. It will send the data to a remote network, potentially, depending on the particular topology of the clusters. And at that point, East-West gateway should probably skip Waypoint to avoid applying L7 policies twice. So yeah, I'm looking for feedback. I'm sure there will be some issues with the proposed design, and I'm happy to take a look at those and try to address and adjust the design. But that basically addresses one of the issues that was brought up in the multi-cluster beta discussions, that currently zTunnel, when waypoints are involved, is kind of blind to what is happening behind the waypoints, and it potentially can like pick a cluster that doesn't actually have healthy backends and send the requests there. And if waypoint at that point cannot like route the request across clusters or like across networks, then the request will fail. Question?
Oh,
there you
sorry, accidental.
Oh, it wasn't a question.
Sorry, my accidental press.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Yeah, so that's pretty much the summary. I don't expect we will be able to discuss the document in details in this meeting because it turned out to be pretty long, but I would like to start the conversation and get some feedback and maybe return to that like next meeting.
So from my understanding, the TLDR is Z-Tunnel is going to send, Z-Tunnel is going to send to a waypoint. That waypoint can be local or remote. And then the waypoint, depending on if there's no local healthy endpoint to the destination of the traffic, the waypoint can also send cross-cluster using double HVEN.
Yeah, I suspect.
Version.
Yes, pretty much. I suspect that it's in principle already can send cross-cluster. This one is opening paths for like cross-network specifically, like, and that's why
Yes.
double HBON is relevant here.
Yes, good call out. And then you've got the Envoy config. That's useful.
Yep.
Anyone else hate Envoy a little bit more after reading this proposal? No, that's not a diss on you, Mike. That's
that's fine. It took a while for me to understand what is happening in the Envoy config.
Yeah, it's super complicated as a necessity, not because you didn't come up with a right simple pathway. Yeah, but I think I think this is good direction. One thing I'm on the fence about, I don't necessarily disagree. I'm just not quite sure. In Istio, one of the things we had done in like sidecars, a ton of work on, was making sure that we don't end up with a scenario where we're like bouncing back and forth between clusters. But I think, so in this case, we can go to 3 clusters, but I think it's fine because the case we really wanted to avoid in sidecars was like, I'm starting cluster A, I call cluster B's east-west gateway and it sends back to cluster A, or it's like ping-ponging between an infinite number of clusters, all of which are terrible behaviors. I think the fact that we're going from 2 hops to 3 in some cases is probably good. I think it's actually better because it guarantees that even when we're going cross-cluster, we always can get an L7 hop. That's obviously smarter. So I think that makes sense, but something to keep in mind of whether we want to do that or not.
Yeah, I understand. Like, there is a section with caveat that like sort of describes those how many hops you can get. I kind of convinced myself that there is no guaranteed way to avoid in the worst case scenario, like jumping between networks multiple times. But one thing relevant here, like in terms of like, if we don't want to avoid multiple hops in all the cases, right? What I'm proposing is the default behavior is remote networks, like kind of a second choice only when nothing is available on the same network. So that's the idea of the default behavior. So the multiple hops in this situation will happen if, like, first we don't have on the local network a healthy waypoint endpoint, then we send to another network. At that point, the waypoint there will look at after applying all the L7 policies for the endpoints for the actual service way it's supposed to route the data, and if it doesn't find anything locally for that remote waypoint, then it will hop again. So that's kind of the idea. But yes, it is possible. I'm just like I convinced myself that it's not possible to avoid it in all the cases unless we want to accept like sort of failing the request early in some cases.
Again, I haven't looked at the entire proposal in detail, but as part of this, are we also? I assume we're also adding in remote endpoints to the local waypoint. Is that correct? So if you go to the local waypoint, you could at some point have a policy where, I don't think we do this today, but down the line you could have a policy where that local waypoint whose traffic 50% local, 50% remote based on the endpoint. Is that accurate? Does the waypoint now have remote endpoints?
If you implement this proposal, like it will have endpoints for the remote network, and you can like the default behavior that again this proposal is that the remote endpoints will only trigger if the local endpoints are unhealthy to like some extent, depending on the over provisioning factor. But it's possible to change that behavior using a destination rule. Like I think that the regular like failover configuration in the destination rule will be applied in this case.
Awesome, thanks.
John?
Yeah, the only other comment I had mainly was around the failover semantics. One thing I wasn't clear on, if you were describing how Istio failover works in general, or if you were proposing a new way to do it in terms of like setting the priorities and whatnot.
What is in the design doc is by default, when you don't set anything, like there will be a failover behavior where you prefer local network to the remote network. That is not something that you need to describe. But on top of that, you can actually use a destination rule with a like regular description for failover behavior if you want to override this default. That's also possible.
My question really was, that's already kind of how Istio works in general. So are we introducing a new, slightly different, but maybe large overlap? Or is this just describing like this is how Istio works and will continue to work that way?
I'm not sure. Like the destination rules definitely the same way as Istio works currently. I'm not sure what you mean by Istio already works this way when we're talking about the default failover, like preferring local network to the remote network.
Yeah, so Istio has the destination rule, locality load balancing config, but there's also a mesh config locality load balancing config, and that already has a default that prefers the same network. So I'm just wondering, like, we already have, like, there's nothing about ambient doing multi-cluster in my mind that requires different semantics on when and how to fail over. And we already have a lot of APIs around this. And so I was just thinking, like, we shouldn't make a new mechanism. What you've described is essentially already how it works.
Yeah, okay.
But we shouldn't make a new mechanism. We can just reuse the existing ones, right?
Yeah, okay. I didn't think about it. And what I was proposing is like sort of hard coding some of the behaviors there. But if you're saying there is already APIs that kind of configures that by default, I will just rely on that.
Yeah, it should be pretty easy. Basically, like in the EDS, it would just do it. Like you'll have to do more work to not use the existing stuff. So
probably true. So then the existing behavior is what we will implement here.
Yeah, I would slightly disagree with John that we should not make any change. I mean, the current behavior, it's a bit complicated and apparently a lot of people don't know about it. So maybe better documentation, maybe improving the API somehow, it will still be useful, not...
I mean, I'm totally on board with like improving documentation. I will be happy to contribute that part. But
and even API can be adjusted, I think. Even API can be improved a bit. And mesh config is, you know, we did it. It's kind of frozen, but it was a long time ago, and we got a lot of feedback. We kind of discovered a few things. It may be worth from time to time, especially when we move to ambient, to make some adjustments.
Do you have a proposal?
No, I'm suggesting to look at what Kubernetes has done recently around load balancing, because they made some changes in the APIs and see if we can replicate some of it or use some of it. That's kind of my usual. I mean, if there are standards, other people doing the same thing, it may be better to get closer to them.
Yeah, we do actually support those today. So if you have the Kubernetes one set, we respect it, and then if not, we use the Istio one.
Oh, like things like prefer close. That's what.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I see.
Yeah, and again, like you'd have to try hard to not use that because it's in just kind of the standardized logic.
Cool. Then I think that's all I wanted to get out of this meeting. The document is still out on review, and I will bring it up next meeting as well. Just give people some time to think about it, but I think we are more or less in alignment.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We've got Zerain asking for feedback on the Envoy filter and waypoint. Is here? I don't see him. I know the time zone is rough, but yeah, this is a good call out. I know that I lost track of this. I wasn't sure if it was being worked on or not, but I guess I assume there's been some changes, and so we need to add some feedback on the Envoy filter and waypoint proposal. So yeah, I think this is another one on the list to review. So I will add this to our list up here. Make sure it continues to be on a fancy preview. There you go. Okay. All right, so action item for TOC to take a look at, and anybody interested, take a look at this proposal.
Yep, I just skimmed it super quick, obviously, and it looks like it has everything I expected, or at least it's closer to than when I last looked. So,
okay, so there has been changes. All right, I'll take a look then. Thank you, Zerain. All right, I think next on the agenda is Liam White for first class Lua filter support. Is Lua here? Is Liam here in the meeting?
I don't see him here. No.
Yeah, does not appear so. Okay, I do see some folks with some early feedback. I'm interested to see this because a couple years ago I pursued something similar, so maybe this will end this time. All right, so Liam, if you're watching this, we will take a look, and I look forward to you talking to us about this RFC. Okay, moving along then. I won't say, I'm not going to jinx us. All right, Stephen, supporting dry run auth policies in zTunnel.
Yeah, so there was a discussion on the zTunnel. I think a week ago, somebody wanted a dry run in zTunnel. Currently, if a policy is dry run, we just ignore it. For zTunnel, it's an alpha feature, so I want to implement it, but I don't want to implement it if it's just not going to get merged. So I'm wondering if anybody has any fundamental issues with it, other than maybe that it's alpha.
So there's both dry run and there's audit, which
yeah
feels similar. Could you remind me what the difference between them is?
I read about it. I can't quite remember, but it was along the lines of who owns which part of the API.
Not sure I understand. I guess in dry run you can have allow or deny, which would be different because audit, I guess, doesn't have like audit deny.
Yeah, maybe let me read up on it a little bit more, and then I'll send a message on the Slack.
Okay.
But
the other thing I would like to know is, let's say I have one real allow policy and one dry run allow policy. Do we? How does that work? Do we? Because right now we short circuit, right? We look for, if we find any allow policy, we exit. And I think it was you that had reviewed my PR that was adding like counters for the authorization policies, which is kind of a similar problem. I don't know how it works in Envoy. I don't know how we want to work in zTunnel, but that's something we'll need to solve. And what do we do when we hit the dry run? Like, is it a log or a metric? Or this counter? Maybe it's merged in with the counter. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I'm not opposed to this, but I also don't know how it will work, so we should maybe talk through some
okay,
ways.
yeah. I mean, that's actually really good feedback of what questions I should be asking. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe like figure out what we do with audit as well. I think audit's even more niche than dry run.
And I don't think it's supported, right?
No, we don't support dry run or audit. So
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Stephen?
No.
Okay. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we're on the last topic of a very full agenda today. No,
Crazy.
folks. Some folks didn't attend, but yeah. All right. Gustavo, if you're here, take us home with wildcards and service entry for ambient mode.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. Like, I wasn't expecting it to reach us. But yeah, so we've well, first of all, thanks everyone for the comments in the documents. We tried to address everything we could. So there were some concerns regarding security, so we tried to address those. We also have a POC, a proof of concept, on a draft PR at the moment. And all of the policies and HTTP route interaction as well. We had a look at that, and we have some solutions for those as well. So yeah, please, if you can take another look in the document, it'd be really nice. We have added a couple of things there, and I guess there's an API change as well, because this was one of the things that was raised initially with the service entry API and the resolution mode, right? And we're basically proposing a new resolution mode, right? So Jackie put up a PR for the API in order to add that. So if people can chip in as well for that, it'd be really nice. So what we're basically proposing for the API change is we want to add a DNS, or sorry, it's dynamic underscore DNS, right, Jackie?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's what we want to propose, and the idea is once that resolution mode is used, the waypoint is going to be responsible for doing the resolution.
And I've linked both of those PRs in the working group notes for folks to take a look.
Yeah, and the POC at the moment, we have it working with HTTP only, but we just added support for well, it's not yet in the POC, and it's a PR that is open at the moment, where we add TLS origination support as well, which is basically the HTTP route and then destination rules. Is it destination rules? I don't remember the name, but anyways, so TLS origination should be supported as well. Yeah.
All right, thanks. I'll take a look at the API changes. Oh, Costin.
So you said to do DNS in Waypoint?
Yes. So the idea is to use Envoy, right? The dynamic forward proxy on Envoy to, excuse me, to do the resolution.
Which waypoint are you talking about? Because that what you are describing basically, it's DNS over HTTP or DNS over TLS, which is kind of how DNS is implemented. I mean, it's going to a gateway that is, could be Cloudflare, Google, or someone else, and that's the one solving the DNS.
So the proposal is actually over a VIP, right? So we're going to use a VIP there, so the application will use DNS transparently. The tunnel will do the capture and will return a VIP, right? And through that VIP, that's how we reach the waypoint. And from the waypoint, we'll use HTTP or TLS metadata to do the resolution, right?
And this waypoint is an egress gateway, Costin, if that helps.
But I'm sorry. Maybe I missed something, but that's you are describing standard DNS, absolutely out of box. I mean, it's if you put the IP at the VIP of a waypoint, you put the VIP of another server or whatever it is. That's how DNS works with all major providers. I want to make sure that you are not basically reinventing the wheel or doing something different than what everyone else is doing, and kind of an Envoy specific solution or Istio specific solution where it's straightforward DNS over TLS or with the DNS has support for metadata to indicate, anyway, check the standards, because you may just describe how the DNS works.
But I hear what you're saying. I mean, we're doing this. It's essentially we're initiating, or like the forward proxy filter initiates its own DNS request, and it has its own cache based on the host or SNI, and it uses that address to initiate its own DNS request and keep its own cache. And that's because we return a VIP representing that wildcard host. So we need this for wildcard. This is how we support it today in sidecar mode when you have multiple servers representing or backing a wildcard host.
Yeah, how the DNS server responds, that's its business. But his original implementation actually was in Istio-D, where the VIP was actually pointing to Istio-D, and we're using DNS over TLS, I believe, to talk, or I don't remember which one, but to talk with Istio-D, and Istio-D was resolving directly, which probably it's a better idea than having the waypoint, because it's more secure point for DNS, and it has all the information already. So I'm not entirely sure why would you go to waypoint instead of going to Istio-D. But anyway, either way, it's a standard, absolutely out of box, nothing special in it. And if you keep it not Istio specific, I'm happy. Otherwise, I'll be very curious to know what you're changing.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, I understand. I mean, Istio-D is assigning the VIP that corresponds to the wildcard host defined in the service entry. There's no way it could define a VIP for the whatever host you end up making requests for that match that wildcard.
Why not? I mean, it has all the information, no?
I mean, you have to define then a service entry for each of those actual destinations, and it defeats
implement exactly the same, or implement the exact same code you would implement in the waypoint in Istio-D. I mean, we do a lot of stuff in Istio-D around resolution and discovery and all the other stuff. I mean, custom code. You don't have to create a service entry for everything. You can do custom whatever. We did it before. Anyway, forget about this. I just want to make sure that you are aware that Istio-D is another place where you can place DNS, and it's a standard that should work regardless of where you place it, and should not be implementation specific. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you, Jackie and Gustavo. I'll take a look at this dynamic DNS PR. As a whole, it looks good to me based on what we were discussing before. So, all right, lots of proposals for folks to review. Means we're a busy community, and that's a good thing. I think I saw Liam sneak in here. Are you here, Liam?
Yes, I just joined from another meeting. Sorry.
No worries. We're going to give you 10 minutes to talk about Lua filters.
Wait a second. Hold on. We have to ask first, Liam, how long has it been since you've attended an Istio meeting?
Maybe 5-6 years. Something like that.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, so for context, obviously, I'm no longer a Tetra, I'm a DocuSign, so this is purely coming from a DocuSign perspective, so like end user request, effectively. One of the things, and I don't want to make this DocuSign specific, maybe, or DocuSign specific particularly, but one of the things that it currently is in existence is, Kostin, do you want to start?
Sorry, my phone is very sensitive.
Okay, all right. So in this in general, I wanted to kind of get like some feedback and like, is this something that the community is willing to accept before I go and like spend too much time doing this. We've done some benchmarking. I've done some benchmarking that I've included in the result. But generally, like as Envoy filters are considered the API of last resort pretty much everywhere, like Istio CTL basically says they stop doing this whenever you create the resource. And in ambient, they're basically like even less than alpha. One of the things that we kind of want is a somewhat supported way of doing Lua filters or Lua plugins without having to resort to Envoy filters, right? We extensively use WASM plugins and Lua plugins, Lua filters, whatever we're going to call them. And really, this is about kind of aligning those, or at least my proposal is about aligning those APIs so that the matching is all done the same as the existing WASM plugin API. So the API is almost identical. It is identical apart from things that don't specifically apply to Lua. And then you would add inline Lua rather than, OCI linking to the WASM binary. So that's kind of like the high level thing. I haven't gone too much into detail just because it's an RFC and I don't want to spend too much effort on this if this is something that's just like dead on arrival. I know Keith has had a proposal recently that he linked, or recently 2 years ago that he linked me to. So like, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this is something that the community is amenable to before I spend too much effort on it. Austin. You're on mute, Costin. I don't know if you're speaking or not.
I think he might have accidentally done it. It sounds like he's been, his phone's finicky.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into kind of more detail. It's like the RFC doesn't go into too much detail because it's literally like everything that the WASM API does, just do the same but Lua, right? The only difference there is the root cache clearing stuff, which we've had some issues with internally, but you can explicitly do this in Lua code. I know there's some discussion on the proxy WASM. Like I've seen the spec discussion, there's an issue like discussing whether or not the root cache clearing is going to be on by default in the whatever the vnext spec is. So I've not included it in this API because within Envoy, you can explicitly tell within the Lua filter in particular, you can explicitly tell Envoy to reset the root cache, or to clear the root cache. So that's why that's not been included. But everything else from a UX perspective, like the desire is to keep it as close to the WASM plugin API as possible. So you don't have to kind of learn two APIs as a user. And one of the comments on the RFC was around like generally Lua is used in more specific like targeted use cases, which is true. But like my preference would be well, for a start, there's no reason WASM can't be used more specifically if you really wanted to. And if we really wanted to make the API more expressive, we should just do it for both. There's like no reason why one should have it and the other shouldn't, because it's just confusing to users, I think.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I'm pretty supportive of this. The WebAssembly support in Envoy has been, how should I say this? It's been up in the air for a couple years, and so I think Lua, but many users turn to Lua for having something that Envoy, like that's not Alpha and Envoy, to be able to do this. I also think that the memory details here for the default Lua, default Lua memory usage versus default like WASM memory usage is pretty striking. It's almost an order of magnitude, in some cases, an order of magnitude difference in memory consumption. I know that's been one of the big issues I had with WASM when I was at an end user company. So I'd be supportive of this directionally. From an API perspective, I guess the only thing I would think we should consider as a project is, if we're just going to be like sort of copying the WASM plugin resource, does it make sense to potentially do a just have a more generic resource essentially to host both? But that's just a far-fetched question at this point. So yeah, I think generally I'd be in favor of this.
Yeah, some of the challenges there are around like there are slightly different things, right? Like Lua, I know you can you could boil the ocean and have Lua behave the same way that WASM plugins are pulled in and a bunch of other stuff. But there's like a subset of different fields there, I think. And just for context, within like the way we use WASM in DocuSign is we have like per sidecar and per gateway single plugins that we use config to enable specific paths on, right? So it's like this, in air quotes, monolithic WASM plugin. And those are like properly optimized because often they're on our gateways, right? So we need to have them properly optimized even for things like memory allocation, because we use Go for it, right? And heavily scrutinized. And a lot of what we use Lua for is like a third-party application is like one example specifically is a third-party application is misbehaving and not setting the host header correctly on an application, right? And we just need a Lua, like we can't fix it via rewrites because you can't properly match on it because of conflicts with other requests that come in within the namespace, right? There's like limitations of expressiveness within the Istio API and how it's implemented in Envoy. That means you can't specifically target it. So we literally just have a Lua filter on that says, like, I'm just going to rewrite the host header, right? So then everything just magically works. And yes, we could fix that properly, but it's a third-party application that our developer teams have no interest in contributing to, right? They have to go through this whole process in order to do it. So it's like a workaround to just get it working, and maybe in a year or so they can fix the problem, right? But that kind of stuff's not going to get prioritized, and it's unrealistic for the platform team to go around fixing all these applications for application teams, especially when it's third-party things. John?
Yeah, one question I have, are we only targeting the ability to target a kind of the listener level, matching like WASM, not at the route level?
Yes, at the moment. Like I don't know if I mentioned this in the RFC, but like what I'm specifically aiming for here with this RFC is to have feature parity for targeting, and then increase the specificity of the targeting of both if we want to add that in the future, right? But that's like out of scope for this RFC. I didn't want to like completely boil the ocean.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, the reason I ask is in a different context, I've been looking at like kind of route level things, and I found it's a much crazier problem than I thought. So I want to make sure that if we're doing that, we put a lot of thought into how we do it. It doesn't need to block this at all. It's tricky with the whole route cache and all sorts of things. So I figured it's very hairy, and like this solves like 80% of our use cases for a lot of this stuff. So like, or this API is expressive enough to solve for like the large majority of that stuff. So like, if we want to do a phase 2 where we start actually making the whole matching API more expressive, that's reasonable. But like I said, I don't want to boil the ocean. Yeah, it makes sense. One thing that's a bit ironic is that with the proposal that was just presented a second ago, like Envoy filter was actually originally designed to insert Lua plugins essentially. And then with the ambient change, the UX is actually not as terrible as it used to be. I still think it's probably valuable to have a native thing, but I just calm down. I've got to drop. Thanks.
Louis?
Liam, of the use cases in DocuSign, how many of them would actually require Lua or something simpler like Cell? Like the example you gave of like rewrite the host header, right? If it was malformed, sounds like something the Cell could do.
Potentially, yes. I would have to like look into the use case more. Like a lot of because obviously I've only been in DocuSign for like 2 months. A lot of the use cases of Lua are historic and predate me being at the company,
Yeah.
right? So it's a lot of coming in and trying to not correct, but like try to build slightly better foundations than everything's an Envoy filter. So like that's kind of where this is coming from. So like in theory, yes, I'm open to that, but I would need to go and look at exactly all of the Envoy filter use cases.
Yeah, maybe if you could just add a section in the doc if you get a chance to look and talk about it a little bit. Like obviously there are things that Cell can't do and that you're going to go to something more procedural. But it would be useful to get a sense for this, given that we have like runtime support for all three things.
Mm-hmm.
And to Keith's earlier comment about maybe having something more generic, you know, Cell might be the third thing, and maybe it's useful to consolidate a more generic API. I haven't given it a ton of thought, so take that for what it's worth right now. But if you don't mind doing a little poking around, that would be useful.
Okay. I'll just add a note in the appendix to.
Does Envoy? I'm sorry, we're over time, but does Envoy have a generic cell filter in the way that it does Lua?
It has generic Cell runtime support in a bunch of places.
Okay, so it might be.
It also has its own expression language, obviously for the matchers in the chain, which was. But there is Cell support. We use Cell in authorization policy, right?
No. Maybe? No, Win. Yes, we do. We do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, with Win.
Unless I've been hallucinating for the last 5 years, Keith.
Sorry, I forgot about that little. I was thinking about a different API. But yeah, okay. So you're thinking that maybe we could use some of the Cell support elsewhere. Okay, fair enough.
Anything that's expression like or assignment based on single expression, Cell's pretty good for that.
Would we be so? All right. So from my end, you want me to go look at see how much of it would be Cell based, and then what in the doc? Like, would it be an extension, additional API? Like, what's the?
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have to do all. I just want some general sense. A lot of things that I've seen people write WASM or Lua for could have been done with Cell. Cell should be cheaper. Certainly, it's much cheaper than WASM, both CPU and memory. Should also be cheaper than Lua, though Lua should be closer, just based on my understanding of the runtime.
For context, what we see when we're monitoring like WASM versus Lua stuff is like in terms of latency, we like see about a 0 to 10% increase in performance from WASM over Lua, and then we see about the same in CPU usage, obviously with a bigger memory hit.
Yeah. Lua's sharing the memory space, and then they should have pretty equivalent compiler ergonomics. Cold start stuff aside, Cell has no compiler overhead.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's trivial. It also depends on if you're performance sensitive or not. You could do your own little performance benchmark and see. I know John's done some performance benchmarking of Cell, but I think that was from ztunnel and Rust, not on Envoy recently. So there are some published numbers out there.
Okay.
All right, folks. William, give us the last word, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, I just had one comment about like this new like Envoy feature, like dynamic modules of loading like compiled dynamic libraries, into Envoy.
Good point.
Yeah, that's just something to throw around. Well, that's it.
We're looking at maybe 4 between Lua, WASM, dynamic modules, and Cell. Right? No, yeah, like 4 different things. So we should probably figure out how I want to handle extensibility generally. And then you maybe 5 if you throw an X prop. And at one point we're talking about doing that. So
yeah, I mean, from my perspective, what I care about is the API stability, and that's like why I don't want to use Envoy filters. Right? Istio provides no guarantees around that API. Well,
right.
It provides some, but not like as much as you would with something like the WASM plugin API, right?
Yep, that's correct. Okay. We should figure this out because there's a lot. All right, folks. Sorry we went a bit long, but appreciate everybody's attendance. Lots of exciting new things to dig into, and we will see you at the next appointed time. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Cheers.